Hi there, it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. I made a card design similar to this not too long ago where I have a flat back panel which is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and then I have the middle panel which is 3 inches wide by 5.5 inches. And there is a reason that you'll see in a little bit as to why I picked this design. So I'm starting off pretty similar to the last card I made. I'm using this is the Tim Holtz, I think it's a design ruler. It is 0 centered in the middle, which helps me to just figure out where I need to put a little bit of tape so that I can add embossing paste to the sides without adding it to the middle, because I want a nice flat surface to adhere down the front panel. You could probably adhere it down fine, but this just makes it a little bit easier, and I like going with easier. Now I'm going to use the Crafters Workshop Light and Fluffy modeling paste, but any embossing paste, modeling paste, texture pastes, whatever you have in your stash would work absolutely fine here. And I'm going to go with a theme of stars down the side, but again, any stencil that you have would work. It just gives a little bit of interest down the sides. You could also do some stenciling or put some die cuts there on the background, just something to cut that plain white backing. And I'm also going to keep it white because I really want the main feature to shine through. I don't want to distract from it at all, but if you wanted this to be a color, you could either add some reinkers or some acrylic paint or something to your embossing paste that would color it if you don't already have a colored embossing paste or texture paste or something. So anyway, before it dries, I'm going to peel off these little low-tack pieces, and I love this mint tape because it is the perfect amount of stick. I said this a few videos ago, but I purchased a lot of low-tack tape, some brand name ones, some from the hardware stores, the purple tape. I bought a lot, and this was by far my favorite. So now I am going to move on to creating the fun part of this card. So I'm using some acetate. This happens to be heat resistant, and I will need that because I am doing some embossing on my acetate. I want to make a clear see-through shaker element in my card, in fact 3 of them. So I'm going to use this balloon here, and I'm going to die cut that out twice for every balloon I want to make, obviously, so one for the front and one for the back. So you can see that mine also has a little dotted detail around the edge, which will be fine in the end too. I'm going to have some VersaMark sticky embossing ink, and then before you do any embossing, particularly on acetate, you want to use some sort of anti-static powder to eliminate the risk factor of embossing powder sticking where we don't want it to. Now I needed some little tiny dots, and this is a really old stamp set from Lawn Fawn, and I cut out a couple of those dots from the bottom there, so they will work just fine. I am going to use the VersaMark and just add some little dots. It's kind of meant to look like party sequins or those little metallic bits and pieces that circles that come inside of party balloons and things. So I am going to go all around with the large one, and I don't necessarily want to cover the outside of the circle, but you'll see here once I add the gold embossing powder just kind of what design I went for. So I used 2 different size little dots, and this is because I'm making a clear shaker element, and I will need adhesive on here somewhere. So this is my solution to that little problem. I am sort of disguising where the adhesive will go. Then once I have kind of got the dots where I want them, and you can see that they are not completely solid, there are definitely gaps in between and things, then I'm going to use my heat gun and melt all of that embossing powder. Again, this is why I need to have my heat resistant acetate. So that is the front all done. Now there's a few ways that you could do this. This is just one. I have some scrapbook.com double-sided adhesive, and I have die cut out the same balloon that I used for my acetate, and then I'm just taking a pair of scissors and going around so that I get the very outside here. Now what you could do is just use some double-sided tape, but double-sided tape often doesn't curve that well, like for this shape of going around a balloon, that much of a curve. So that's why I chose to just go the easy option and die cut the balloon and then cut out the center. Then I'm just going to fix it around the outside so that I now have some double-sided tape around the outside. I will take off half or about 3/4 of the release paper from that balloon, and then stick the one that we heat embossed directly on top. Now obviously with a flat shaker here, I've made this very flat, it's just 2 pieces of acetate put together. There are not too much room for shaker elements, so I'm just going with some gold glitter that I had. I just want to pour a really tiny amount in because, as you can imagine, there's not too much space in there. Pull out the rest of the release paper and then seal it up, and I have a nice little shaker balloon that is completely see-through, and you cannot see much of the adhesive at all. If you look really closely, then you can, but it is definitely disguised by that gold heat embossing. So I went ahead and made 3 of these balloons to go on the front of my card. And this is the reason why I wanted my front panel to be nice and skinny, because I want to be able to see the see-through aspect of these balloons. So you'll see it put together in just a minute. I am going to go ahead and heat emboss a little scrap here because I wanted to do the strings of the balloon and make sure that they all match. I definitely do have some gold mirror cardstock and things like that, but when I am using embossing powders, I find it really distracting if they're kind of not matching. So for me, it's much easier just to use the same embossing powder and emboss it on a little scrap of paper, and that way everything matches really nicely. Then once I'd cut this out, I realized I wanted to do something a little bit extra. So a little tip that I have is when I am doing heat embossing and things, often I don't do this on camera because it's a bit of a waste of time, but I just wanted to share this tip with you. I will do a full page or a half page of Nina Solar White, and I will emboss the whole page and make sure that it is all nicely covered. Then I will die cut or use whatever I need to cut, and then I will write on the back of the paper which embossing powder I melted on there. And I just have a little container out the side of my desk, and I put all my embossed scraps there, and then that way if I come to my next project and need some embossed paper with that particular color of embossing powder, then often it's already there ready to grab, and it saves me a step. This is a little bit hard when I'm doing it on camera because I like to show all of my steps, but if I'm just card making and I'm not filming, then I definitely just pop into that little container. So that's a tip that might help you guys. Now I have die cut out the words happy birthday. These are some very delicate words. They are from Simon Says Stamp, and I believe that they have been discontinued, but any little happy birthday die cuts, or in fact you could use the sentiment for any occasion at all, and you could change up the balloons for a different shape, for example stars, or even just do some bubbles and circles or anything. You could definitely change this up to suit what you needed for the occasion, but I am choosing happy birthday for this one, and I just want to have half of these dipped in gold. Again, the same gold that is going to match everything else, all of the embossing that I already have on my project. So I just used a little bit of low-tack tape and then added embossing, sticky embossing ink, which is the VersaMark ink, onto the lower half of these letters, and that way I have a nice crisp line in the middle. Now here is my frame that I created with that big emboss sheet that I had. This is going to go right around the back of my whole back panel. So this is the 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch 110 pound Nina Solar White panel. And that fits nicely around the edge, and I used the Hero Arts Infinity rectangle dies to create that. Then here is my little panel that will go on the front, and again it sits really nice and flat because we made sure that the embossing was not there in the middle. So I will press it down, and you can see that the card sits up really nicely. It just sits like a normal card, a normal top folding card. And now we just need to add our elements onto the front. So I'm using a little bit of matte medium, that is my liquid glue, the Ranger Multi-Medium in the matte finish. And I'm using a little makeup sponge to adhere onto the back of these really fine die cuts. If I were thinking about it earlier on, I probably could have added some Stick It double-sided adhesive to the die cuts, but using liquid glue works just as well, and I will pop a little acrylic block on there just to make sure that it's held down whilst it dries nice and flat. Then as for adhering the balloons, again, you do need to be a little bit careful because they are completely see-through, being acetate on both sides. So I found the best way to adhere them down was I was just going to follow the outside line of where the adhesive already is. And again, that just comes in handy. Heat embossing really works because it hides where we're going to put that adhesive. So you cannot see any of this on the finished card. It's really, really fun. I had heaps of fun making this card, and I'm definitely going to make some clear see-through elements again. Admittedly, this kind of shaker element doesn't have the shaker sound. That's kind of not what we're creating. It's more just the fact that you can see through the whole balloon. And that is the point here, using that middle panel. When I lift it up, you will be able to see right through those balloons, and I guess the recipient can kind of see that they're completely see-through. So you do need to give it a minute to dry because there is not too much area holding these on. So I gave it a little bit to dry. I'm adding a few little strings just down, just really short ones, because I didn't want it to cross over top of the sentiment down the bottom. And this is a really nice gold and white see-through element card. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks, bye!